So I pick him up, and the next thing I know is I remember there was all this milk froth just coming out from his mouth, kind of like that froth that you would find on the top layer of your coffee. So I had no idea, and I hadn't done any first aid at the time. But I remember I was panicking, and my wife and I were both panicking. Passion is about having that clarity about who you are and what is your unique superpower. That made me realize how little I knew about life. Every single day I was hammering myself with the same existential questions. What is my purpose? Why am I here? How do I become a better father? How do I become a better person? I realized there are three things which I now call sort of my moral compass that these transformational people do and they focus on.
Hello listeners, welcome to the Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon podcast. This is the first time we have this sign here, actually, fun fact as well. And the first time I'm having a guest all the way from Hong Kong, and he just arrived a couple of days ago, and he's here with us in KL in Colony. Today we are at Colony. So we have Aaron Pang here with us, and this book, just want to show the cameras. This book, he has actually wrote many books, authored a journal as well, and many books here on the table. So he has done many books, and I'll just do a quick introduction before we get into it. So he has authored many books, is a motivational speaker. When we spoke, he's here in KL actually to do some training, some workshop, and he is the founder of Transformative Purpose, Aaron Pang, and an inspirational platform to share inspiration ideas. He has interviewed over 60 guests, right, at the moment, and one of the top 3% globally ranked podcasts called Transformative Purpose. He's also, in the end of the day, he's a passionate father. He was just telling me he has 2 boys with his wife, and he lives, of course, in Hong Kong. So Aaron, welcome to KL.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, Bob.
And welcome to the pod as well. You are my first guest, I said, that is from Hong Kong. So maybe I'll ask you a question, right? So this used to be my question that I ask every guest, but then I sort of gave up on it because everyone keep giving me the same question, the same answers. So what is your favorite Kung Fu movie?
Whoa, what is my favorite Kung Fu movie? It's gotta be Ip Man.
Ip Man.
Yeah,
Ip Man.
yeah. I've watched so many times.
Have you met Donnie Yen because you're in Hong Kong?
No, not in person.
In person. But have you
to.
seen, like, because that movie is largely, especially the early Ip Man 1 to 3, is largely in Hong Kong. So have you seen any, like, the balcony scene? I love the balcony. Is it in Hong Kong?
Which balcony scene?
They were fighting in the balcony. There's many scenes, but any scenes in the movie you've seen in real life?
Not that I recall.
Oh, okay.
Not that I recall. Actually, I might add one more to the list. I love Rocky Balboa. And
Rocky, okay.
Yeah, Rocky. Yeah, I can't exactly call it a Kung Fu movie, but it gave me some inspiration.
Okay, maybe let's have another question as well. So tell us something interesting about Hong Kong.
Something interesting about Hong Kong. I think Hong Kong is a very unique place. I think there are very few places in the world like Hong Kong where literally you can get drunk and get pissed and sort of pass out on the street at 2, 3 a.m. in the morning. And then next morning you wake up and you'll be fine. You're safe and you're not robbed. Oh. Yeah. I think there are very few places that are like that in Hong Kong. And I think Hong Kong is also free of many, I guess, natural disasters. We rarely have earthquakes. And I just think that Hong Kong is a very safe place, and people in Hong Kong are very agile, very adaptable. There's always going to be challenges, and I think we have some challenging topics that are coming up with regards to our identity. But I think just like life, whenever there are big sort of transformation that are, I guess, attacking or in a way that are in conflict with our association, it's always going to be tough. But I think no doubt I have full confidence in with the Hong Kong people, and we can get through this, and just like many other challenges we got through in the past.
It's been a tough few years for Hong Kong, I must say that. So like, let's say if I have 24 hours and I arrive in Hong Kong today, what would you tell me to do? Like, there's one thing I need to do in Hong Kong.
Wow, Jesus, you throwing me all these really challenging questions. And now that I'm father of 2, I actually don't go out that much. And the places that we go to and hang out on the weekend are usually kid-friendly places. I don't know if you want to go to places that I go to. Um, but if you have 24 hours in Hong Kong, I would I would try to divide up your itinerary across the three islands. And maybe if I have time, I'll try to hop on a ferry and go to an outlying island, Changzhou or something.
Chongzhou.
Yeah.
Oh,
So you get to experience the different nuances of Hong Kong. I think Hong Kong is made of many different cultures, and just by hopping onto different islands, you really get to embrace, try different food, talk to different people. Like whenever I travel, I like to strike up conversation with the person next to me. Yeah, that's probably one of the best ways you get to know about the city or the country.
oh, I do that as well. What I do is I go to a cocktail bar and speak to the bartender and ask the bartender for recommendations. And normally they give very good recommendations.
Yes.
I talk to the bartender has no choice but talk to me. So so yeah, thank you for answering my questions about Hong Kong and the Kung Fu movie as well. So I found this on your LinkedIn profile, and we'd like to start with this because you are known as Transformative Purpose. And later I'll send the image to Elton. So we have this diagram here just to show you. So transformative purpose diagram. We have helping others, passion, better self. So let's start with that. Like, what is transformative purpose?
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for the question. I think I'd like to circle back why I started writing. About 5 years ago, I had a unconventional experience, I think, as a first-time father. So I was 35. This was back in 2019. And on the 7th of April, we had, I guess, a bit of a journey that I had to navigate. So what happened was 3 nights before my first son, and his name is Finn, he survived. Before he turned 3 months old, he suffocated for about 5 minutes. So it was just an ordinary night. My wife Cammy and I were just binging on Netflix on the couch. And around about 10:04 p.m. in the evening, we heard a scream in the bedroom. And I went into the bedroom, and normally I would let him cry a bit. I'm not one of those parents that would pick up the children straight away. But the noise and sort of the sound that he was making was just very different to other nights. So I pick him up, and the next thing I know is I remember there was all this milk froth just coming out from his mouth, kind of like that froth that you would find on the top layer of your coffee. So I had no idea, and I hadn't done any first aid at the time. But I remember I was panicking, and my wife and I were both panicking. So I rushed him out to the couch. I started patting on his back, and the whole experience lasted for about 5 minutes, to a point where his whole body changed color, and his limbs were not responding, and he closed his eyes. And I literally thought that was it. I had all these crazy thoughts running in my head, thinking, my name is going to appear on the newspaper tomorrow. A father couldn't save his own son. So that put me in a void. For about almost half a year, I was navigating amongst all these negative emotions, and I didn't know what it was. And I remember at the time, I thought I knew what life was about. I thought I was ready to be a father. But when that happened, that made me realize how little I knew about life. Every single day, I was hammering myself with the same existential questions. What is my purpose? Why am I here? How do I become a better father? How do I become a better person? And I started reading more books about purpose. I started watching a lot of videos on TEDx, YouTube, you name it, just to find that clarity. But after half a year, I still couldn't find it. And I thought there was something wrong with me for not knowing what purpose is. And I just remember one day I just said to myself, look, if I don't know what my purpose is, perhaps I should just listen and just follow my heart and just do what I feel is right. And if you remember, 2019 was a very chaotic year for a lot of countries. For a city like Hong Kong, we went through social movements. I was cancelled by a few friends. I was kicked out from different WhatsApp groups. It's just not a world that I was familiar with. And I went back to to people that have known me for a very long time. And sometimes I call, so in relationship, there are three types of depths that you can look at relationships. You have your strong tie, you can have your weak tie, you can have your dormant tie. So strong tie are the people that you frequently interact with. This could be your friends, your families. Weak ties are people that you spend very not a lot of time with. Maybe see them once a year. And dormant ties are the ones you tend to spend a lot of time with in the past, but for some reason, maybe they have now they have their family or they've moved to another country. You just don't see them as often. So I remember going back to a few people that I consider that know me very well previously, and I asked him about my strengths, and it was through those conversations. Two things that popped up. They seem to think that I'm very positive and I'm very authentic. And I remember in my head, I was thinking, positivity and authenticity, what kind of business is that? But there was just this inner voice that said, look, if the place is a negative place, perhaps what I could do is just to give it a bit more positive energy. And it was around about that time in 2019 that I said, I'm just going to go out and spread positive energy. So I started without a purpose. And that led me to many things like writing books and doing a podcast 2 years ago, and how I also look at purpose differently. And I coined it Transformative Purpose because after speaking to over 60 people on a podcast, and after learning from their ups and downs in life and comparing to even myself, and people feel like they feel stuck or they're stuck in a rut, I realized there are three things which I now call sort of my moral compass that these transformational people do and they focus on. The first element is passion, which you touch on, and passion is about having that clarity about who you are and what is your unique superpower. So that's all around, passion, having a very strong passion about the things that you do, and knowing fully what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses. And then the second circle is about personal development, self-improvement. So knowing what your passion is and knowing where your skills are, the next question is, how do you improve as a person, right? And the third element is about how do you actually use your passion and use what you're good at to serve and help other people. And I think fast forward 5 years ago, this clarity didn't come overnight. I started it without a purpose, but I now created this concept called Transformative Purpose because I wanted to share with other people it's actually okay not knowing our purpose, and sometimes it is that mindset that will get you started. And there are also some differences between purpose and a transformative purpose. Transformative purpose is progressive; it can evolve. And this is also one of the things that I learned over the years as well.
Hey everyone, producer Elton here. We share stories from business leaders in Asia, and if this video brought you any value, hit the subscribe button down below, like and share with your friends. Thank you.
Yep. So that's great. So transformative purpose, let's say you were to apply it to a corporate setting, and you have been training people when it comes to this as well. How do you apply it in the professional way?
Yeah. So this is actually one of our icebreakers in a corporate setting. So I usually kick off the icebreaker by asking the audience 5 questions to help them define their transformative purpose. So, and maybe I can test it on you actually. I'll get five questions on you. So, what is your name?
My name is Bob. Yeah.
That's your identity.
Yeah.
And what is your superpower?
My superpower, probably say marketing.
How do you become better as a person?
Work really hard.
You work really hard, and you do a lot of podcasts. You do a lot of webinars. The last time that I went to, you had 300 people on there.
Yeah.
And who do you serve?
I serve businesses in Asia. Yeah.
Yeah. And how do you help them?
By getting their story or their services out there. Yeah.
And there you go, Bob. You just defined your transformative purpose. Literally just 5 questions.
Okay. Thank you. That's maybe I can go deeper into that. But yes, that's how in a gist that you come up with the transformative purpose. And I think you mentioned that your story with your son, so that's very touching indeed. So maybe I've also seen your speaker profile, and you have a lot of inspiration as well. Like you read a lot of books. Like I create this podcast because I love watching podcasts. You ask Elton, I send him a lot of podcasts, right? I listen to a lot of podcasts. And I think as a book writer, of course, you're a great book reader as well. So then, hence you write books. So what's your inspiration?
What's my inspiration? I never thought I would become a writer. In fact, I think if you speak to my wife, I remember my wife always said that I'm very clumsy when it comes to expression. I think my inspiration came from I used to be a consumer of inspirational content. So I guess we just touch on the thing that happened with my son. But growing up, I had to navigate a lot, just helping myself to inspire myself and motivate myself. I don't consider myself any more positive or optimistic than any other human being on this planet. I think I'm just another ordinary person who've been blessed with different personal and professional challenges. I grew up in Hong Kong. I was born and raised in Hong Kong, and growing up, I always found it hard to grasp the concept of home. Last week, I went to a live transformation workshop, and in one of the activities, the facilitator gave us 2 or 3 minutes, and the facilitator asked us to draw what home looks like. And I remember there were 4 of us in the group, and I was the only person who had too much time on my hand because I didn't know what to draw. So my upbringing was like I was part of the second family. I was the elder brother, and I have 4 other step siblings, and now I call them brothers and sisters. But growing up was very much like I didn't want to be home. I didn't want to be part of it. I even went away from home many times, and as a teenager, I actually had suicidal thoughts many times. I had a knife on my wrist many times that I never told anyone. But I realized that fast forward 40 years later, I realized there's actually a lot of power in how we talk to ourselves and how we decide to choose to spend time on ourselves during those vulnerable moments. So when I was a kid, I used to play a lot of basketball. My dream was to play in the NBA. Obviously, it didn't eventuate. That's why we're here. But yeah, during those down moments, I always managed to, I guess, find ways to inspire myself or motivate myself. And I was a big consumer on motivational content and motivational quotes. One of the reasons why I brought up Rocky Balboa, and you remember one of the narrative or one of the quotes that he often said in the movie is that, life is not about how hard it hits you. It's about how hard it hits you, but you still be able to get back up. So I think all of these inspirations have somehow been ingrained in the subconscious mind. And I go back to the conversation that we did just before this one. And I think, when you're focused, you can do things that you never imagined.
Yep. And your inspirations come from your childhood, of course, and also Rocky Balboa. And any books or any type of material that inspired you as well?
I've got a few that I think that are my recent favorites in the last few years. James Clear is one of my favorites. If you are looking to build good habits or
Atomic Habits,
yeah. Build good habits or try to remove some of the negative habits in your system. A very simple 4-step framework where he talks about just building more visible cues. Like, for example, if I want to read more books, right, what do you need to do? You just put books everywhere at home, as opposed to you need to keep things tidy and neat and just shove everything on your bookshelf. So for me, I have a book in my backpack, I have books on the dining table, I have books in my study, I have books in my room. So that's what we call by making your cues very, very visible. So whatever habits that you want to build, you want to make sure you get reminders all the time. So for someone, for example, I wanted to work on my emotions. There was one time that I actually custom made a wristband on my wrist, and on that wrist it says mirror, because mirror is actually a word cue for me to remind myself to take a step back and take a deep breath. So that's the first step about building positive habits. And then you have, how do you make it attractive? How do you make it easy for you? And how do you make it rewarding? So Atomic Habits is a great book. I also love Think Again from Adam Grant. And in his book, he highlights how most of us spend time in three thinking modes, and they are preaching. So preaching Aaron's ideas are the best, and my ideas trump your ideas. So that's preaching. We also have prosecuting. Prosecuting meaning that, I'm trying to spend time to prove that your ideas are wrong, right? And that's prosecuting. And there's also a big part on politicking. So I'm saying things not because I believe in them, or not because I'm authentic in sharing my perspectives. I'm only saying those things because I think those things are what you want to hear. So in his book, he highlights how most of us can build our character and humility just by thinking more like a scientist, like where I could go wrong and what have I learned. So to help us progress. So these two books come to mind, and there was Thinking Fast and Slow. I think that was another one. It talks about different cognitive biases that are within us. And what I love about these books is it gives you awareness, and it helps you slow down when you're thinking in certain mode. And not only does it build your character and does it build your self-awareness, you can also observe from the interaction. Let's say if I'm interacting with Bob today, and I realize that you're exhibiting certain biases. For example, let's say I feel there's a level of authority bias, meaning that you look up to people who have, big titles, who are considered experts or specialists in their field. So let's say if I were to set up a business meeting with you today, I'll make sure I'll tag along someone who is considered expert in the field, and instead of me trying to be, that I know it all, don't know it all person. So that's another book that I also benefited. Oh, and also my all-time favorite, my first self-help book, that was Tuesdays with Morrie. And I read that when I was 19 years old, when I was going through a very rough period of my life. So yeah.
Awesome. And you've been writing these books since 2019, right? So all these books came about since 2019.
Yeah.
This has been barely 5 years. And what is your challenges with writing? I couldn't even write one book. So what is your, it's a very good design, and wow, so many books in 5 years. So how do you do it? And what's the biggest challenge?
I think I probably could have written more if I were more focused.
Wow.
I think if there was one flaw in Aaron, I think I always have a lot of ideas, but not enough mental capacity to execute all the ideas. How do I help it? How did I write it? I think one is, and to echo on the conversation earlier, is to be laser focused and tuning off from all of the distractions. And the way I do it is, when I write, I do time blocks, and I make sure I let other people know that I'm writing, and I'll be writing for the next 4 hours. And unless it's an emergency, please, if it's an emergency, call me. But I will not look at my phone at all during those 4 hours. And recently, when I spoke at the MNC, I also shared this framework that I recently came up with, and which is a way to teach people how to deal with distractions. And I call this the ARM framework. So when we look at distractions, there are 3 ways to respond to it. We can avoid it. So for example, let's say I'm constantly getting distracted by my smartphone. I'll hide it in my bedroom, or I give it to someone else. When I go out on a date with my wife, to ensure I don't get distracted throughout our date night, I actually give her my phone, and that restores my presence. I no longer feel the need to check the nudges on my phone. That's an example of how you can avoid distraction. The second way is to reduce it. And how do you reduce it? You use notification summary, for example. So I set notification summary 3 times a day. So 9 o'clock, 12 o'clock, and 5 o'clock. That's my way of reducing.
Is it an app?
It's free. It's free on your phone. It's on. I believe it's free on Apple. I don't know if it's available on Android.
Yeah.
And the last thing is you sort of manage your distractions. So I use tools like Calendly, for example, to schedule my meetings. So when people need to reach out to me, and last time I looked at the research, we spend, I think, at least an hour and a half each week just to going back and forth and cancellation of meetings, setting up meetings, scheduling meetings. So these are the things that you can actually use tools, use technology with intention to help you manage distractions. So being laser focused and just tuning off from distractions. And I think the last thing is probably a reminder to yourself about who you're doing this for. For me, my anchor, and we had this conversation earlier, my anchor is my children. I actually wanted to leave something behind so that I want them to know. When I first started, I wanted to leave something behind because I wanted them to connect with me, and I wanted them to know that it's okay to get stuck in life because your father did. And it took him 4 years just to get that clarity. And no doubt I'll get stuck again in future. And when you have that anchor, when you have that source of motivation that is not about yourself, that can propel you and carry you for a very long way. And even if you feel lost every now and then, just go back to your purpose, like who you're serving, how you try to help them. And for me, it's benefited me a lot. And that source of motivation has helped me sustain the energy in terms of writing for a number of years.
But it's impressive. There's so many, like people struggle to even write one. You've written so many, and I believe there's many other processes after writing, right? Like publishing, editing, and things like that. So how do you overcome those hurdles?
So I've only gone with one local publisher in Hong Kong. The rest I actually self-publish, and it's pretty easy. If people just jump on Canva, there are already tools and templates which can give you access to book covers, assuming that you're not, I guess, you have a reasonable expectations of how your book covers would look like. And then for self-publishing, you can just jump on KTP, which is a platform for Amazon, and you can download their Word templates and you can start writing. What I like to differentiate though is that some people I know, they use AI to help them write a book, and it's pretty easy. And there are tons of videos online, and that can help you write a book in 24 hours or even in a couple of hours. But every time I write, I actually don't use any tools at all.
It's also, I say, liable, because if you use AI, you need to name it as the co-author, something like that. I'm not sure. Ask an IP expert.
Yeah.
So you don't use tools.
Yeah, I don't use tools, and I have an editor, and he's based in Vietnam. Yeah, so when Unstuck, when I first wrote Unstuck, I thought it was gonna take me 2 months, and
2 months.
This book took me a year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and the manuscript that I first gave it to the editor was nothing like what you see in front of you. There was no framework, no pictures, nothing. Yeah. But I committed myself to a deadline, to a goal, and I turned it with an imperfect product. And we sort of improvise and improve.
Yeah, it's so impressive to do so many things, get an editor and self-publish the book. Which one is published with a publisher?
It's actually didn't bring it. It's a Chinese book called So Ma Jun Ying, Reborn Digital. Yeah.
Oh. Okay. Maybe one day I'll visit you.
No, but I actually, that's an interesting question. And the reason why I wrote that book was how it came about was I never thought I would write a Chinese book on digital transformation. And how it came about was I was having dinner with a group of close friends, and a couple of them like to laugh at or make jokes about my Cantonese. So growing up, my second language has always been stronger than my first language. My English has always been stronger than my Cantonese.
Same here.
And I had no idea why. I remember we were sitting around the hot pot table, and then this conversation came up. And my good friend literally teased at me, and he was like, "Hey, Aaron," it almost sounded like a dare. "Hey, Aaron, if you could write a book in Chinese, I'll really look up to you." And that was what it was said at the dining table. I went home, and I know I had this personality in me, and since I was young, I don't like, if I know I can achieve something, if I know that I'm capable of doing something, I can somehow reframe that into motivation. Yeah. because every one of us, we get rejection all the time, right? And there are really two options you can deal with rejection. One is you accept the rejection and you let the rejection become your reality. And second is you don't let it become a reality, and you try to prove them wrong.
Yeah. That's my strongest motivator too.
So where possible, I try to choose the latter. But I think also, sometimes you also got to understand that you also need to assess whether things that are being said, whether they are aligned to your true passion and your true skills. Otherwise, opinion is always opinion. We can't really control the things that are said in the outside world, and especially in the digital environment today. A lot of people don't really need to take accountability and responsibility of what they said in the public domain. But I think we also can be intentional and selective about the feedback and the criticisms that we are receiving, and also decide what do we want to do with it.
Okay, awesome. So how long do you take to write Reborn Digital?
I had a fallout with the publisher. So when I first reached out to this publisher, the original agreement was that they were going to hire someone to interview me for 6 hours, and we did the 6 hours of interview across over 3 sessions. And they came up the manuscript, presented it to me. I looked at it and I was like, shit, this is rubbish. This is not what I wanted to write. I didn't prepare enough. And I don't think I articulated the contents and framework that I had wanted the writer to write on my behalf. So I went back and I had a chat with the publisher, and I said, look, we have to rewrite this. I don't know how this is going to be, but I can't publish this because I wasn't proud of what was produced. And I blame it on myself because I didn't prepare enough. I didn't tell the necessary contents to the writer. So yeah, and the relationship almost went south, and I think it did go south for a little while, but I did promise them, look, just give me a month and I'll give you a new manuscript. So in that month, I was waking up super early, sleeping late, and I created a new table of contents. I wrote everything in English, and then I put the whole thing. There was no AI then. It was back in 2020. I put the whole thing in Google Translate, and I think there was also a cap, so I had to do it chapter by chapter. Wrote it in English, translated in Cantonese, proofread it myself, and in about a month's time, I turned that manuscript back to the publisher.
Damn, wow, that's wow. Can I imagine doing that as well? That is, and in the end, how long did it take?
About 6 months.
Oh,
yeah, about 6
that's
months.
Impressive as well. I know people take years, right, Alton? I know people take years to write a book, and a lot of people haven't started yet. We even met one of our guests was a book publisher, and a lot of people don't get started with a book, but that's very impressive indeed. So many number of books in a few years.
Can I share one learning?
Yeah.
A lot of people have come to me and asked me, how can you write a book, and how do you write so many in the last few years? I think this one thing really changed. Can change how you look at writing. If you start having the right expectation, if you stop treating your first book as your last book, you will write a lot faster. A lot of people spend a lot of time just thinking that they're just gonna write this one book.
This book is the book of
This
their
book
life.
is it?
Yeah.
This book is going to become a bestseller.
Yeah.
But just like our podcast, we have done 100 episodes.
Yeah.
We made mistakes and we learn
So many mistakes.
from recording, from our content. Writing is just the same, right? If instead of aiming for a 300-page book, maybe you start off with 100-page. Instead of 100,000 words, maybe you start with 10,000 words first. And that could easily become your first book. And instead of thinking that you will find your book in every single bookshelf across all of the major bookstores in your city, why don't you make an ebook first, right? Use the shortest amount of time to create a product, share with people you know, share with people that you don't know, and start getting data for it.
Oh, wow, that's so cool. Like, don't treat it as your last book, right? Just start and expect to make a lot of mistakes. Like you said, you mentioned all your challenges as well while writing these books. So you also mentioned to me like the inspirations you had, all the books like Atomic Habits, etc. Like, this is a personal challenge of mine. I'm actually trying to read more. I buy DH in Malaysia and Singapore. We have this business newspaper called The Age.
Yep.
And I always, it's supposed to be a weekly newspaper, but I take a few weeks to read one. And I have done so many things. I have post-it notes. I read, glance through it first, post many times, put all the post-it notes on the articles I want to revisit. And then, I've tried so many ways to read it, but in the end, didn't read it. So like, do you yourself, I think you're also, like you said, an avid reader. Do you block out time? Do you turn off your phone when you read? What do you do?
Yeah. So can I ask you a question, Bob?
Yeah.
So where in the process do you find challenging
Where in the process?
when you're trying to read?
I would say just finding the time. Because there's a lot of things I could do, like listen to podcasts, scrolling through Instagram, scrolling through LinkedIn, posting content. There's just no time for it, except the toilet or something like that. But it's not part of my routine. Like I think if I imagine if it was in my phone in a more accessible format, probably I would. But it is still not part of my routine. So that's something I'm trying to build into it.
Yeah, and I think to echo what you said, I think there's more of a symptom of how you look at boundary. So for example, I do date night with my wife every Thursday, not related to reading, but I could also give way to many things, right? But there's this one ritual that I will not give way. So we have calendar so we have invitation on both our calendars to say that every Thursday, 6 p.m. we clock off and then we go out and we have dinner, right? That's one way. And I think one of the most important things that people need to do when they think, whether it is becoming more healthy, going to the gym or picking up reading or listening to the podcast, is that you need to set up a non-negotiable ritual.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Just like, do you cancel your business meetings with your clients?
Rarely,
Rarely, right?
Yeah.
Now, if you adopt the same mindset to reading and other things in life, you will find time to read. Yeah.
I see. Yeah, I get what you mean. I think, yes, blocking out time to do it. I think the reason why I listen to a lot of podcasts and consume a lot of video content is because there is something I don't need to block time off for. And so while I'm driving, commuting, while I'm waiting for something or I'm while eating, that's natural. But when I read, I need to dedicate my time to it, which is the challenge, which I think, to your point, is to block out time for it.
Yeah, and can I also add one more point? And I think, I like to read more too. I still think that I don't read enough. But I think people also need to assess what is their ideal sort of learning method. So some people consume contents, maybe yourself, maybe you're more of an audio person. Maybe you consume contents through podcasts, and it's okay not to read, right? Because everyone has their ideal mode of learning. So for some people, it could be reading. I'm more of a word person, text person, so I do consume contents via reading. Some people might be more of a visual person, so they can learn faster when they are reading infographics, right? And also think about how you want to marry up this habit with an existing habit already. Let's say you take a train or you take a bus to work and you have spare time. The easiest way to build things is to build it on top of an existing habit. So instead of mindlessly scrolling your phone on your way to work, you can bring a couple of books and start reading. But yeah, like I said, reading is just one form of learning. It doesn't have to be reading. And yeah, it could be many other things.
Yeah. I listen to podcasts now because I have to prepare to interview my guests. So like, for example, I listened to your session with Jonathan Quack, who was one of my previous guests as well, talking about digital transformation. So we've been talking for some time already. So let's wrap it up. I'll ask you questions. So I also want to promote your podcast. So it's the creator of the Transformative Purpose podcast, right? So if today I had to listen to your podcast, and which episode would you recommend?
Whoa. we just did an episode.
Yeah.
So I think check out our episode.
Okay,
the
of
one
course,
that
of course.
the
If
one
it's
we just
out, if it's out before this.
but we recently there were a couple of people that recently interviewed. There's a gentleman called Blake Hutchison. He's the global CEO for an online marketplace called Flipper. So if you're interested in buying a digital asset, that's a great episode. He highlights some of the myths and things to watch out for when you're considering what business to buy and not to buy. So that's interesting. We just did an episode on longevity with Phil Newman, and that was quite interesting because last year in 2023, the platform that Phil built, which is called longevity.technology, attracted 5 million visitors just on the website, and they're looking to establish themselves as a trusted authority in the longevity space. So those two are a couple of recent episodes that we did, and we also segment our podcast across different themes as well. There's work, health, relationship, motivation and mindset, and also sustainability.
Awesome. I'll definitely check out it. It's on of course on the Apple Store, on iTunes, and of course on Spotify, right? And of course on YouTube as well. And I think I like to ask this to other podcast hosts as well. Like, how do you get your guests?
How do I get my guests? The first batch was just me reaching out to people. I spent a lot of time on LinkedIn, and whenever I came across an inspiring story, I just reach out to them. And I think what I realized after doing this for 2.5 years is that there are many great stories and great people out there. And when you put your heart out, and it's easily to find out guests. But I think you also need to stay true to yourself and be selective about who you're interviewing, and just stay consistent, I guess, with the purpose and with the original messaging, why you started the podcast in the first place. So the podcast was all about sharing inspiration and motivating people. So all our guests, they've gone through ups and valleys in their life. They have faced dark moments. I've interviewed ladies, women who have gone through postpartum. I had a Kung Fu master who had to navigate and learn how to grieve because he lost a very close family member. So it always goes back to that original starting point, why you started the podcast, and make that passion and make that purpose known to people that you're interviewing. And then slowly it's slow balls. Like the more you put yourself out there, and just by staying true and staying consistent to why you're doing it, and you attract the right people.
So you send them emails or it's mainly LinkedIn?
Both.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So please check out the podcast. And I want to shout out the venue as well before we go. So thank you, Colony, for letting us use the space. Very beautiful space. It's very good for the pod. Later we'll take some photos outside as well. Basically, they have a number of locations here in KL, and they transform the work experience into a beautiful service office. So this one I heard was modeled after the Ritz-Carlton as well, somewhere one of the hotels in Vietnam. So thank you, Colony, for having us and letting us use the space as well. And thank you, and please subscribe to us on YouTube, like the video as well, and please subscribe to the Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon podcast. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.